Huge rollout of the vaccine here in the UK, and yet no speeding up whatsoever of the lockdown as we head to the extension of lockdown powers for another 6 months to the end of October. All that coming up. Right now, let's talk to Richard Tice. He's leader of Reform UK about what is happening with these EU vaccine wars. Good morning to you, Richard.
Good morning to you, Julia. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? The EU fridges seem to be stuffed full of millions and millions of AstraZeneca vaccines. Their leaders have recommended people don't take them. And yet now we hear that actually the EU leaders want to ban the exports of AstraZeneca. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. Either they want our vaccines and want to use them, or they don't want them, in which case, can someone else use them who actually be very grateful?
Well, first they said that AstraZeneca wasn't effective, Macron and Merkel, for over 65s, even though, of course, it's over 65s who are most crucial to get vaccinated.
Exactly.
One could argue they're the people who need it pretty much almost entirely and no one else does, is the argument from some people. And then they said they were unsafe. Now they're shown that they have been safe. The European Medical Agency, for the second time, saying that they are safe and that any supposed side effects of blood clots not necessarily due to the vaccine, and even if they were, they would, as many are pointing out, including the vaccine experts in this country, that actually the risk of blood clots from getting COVID would be a higher risk anyway. But now they're saying that actually you can have AstraZeneca, but not above the age, so not below the age of 55. I mean, it is quite bizarre, the changing policy. This is fundamentally, though, is it not? This is not about saving lives in the EU, is it? This is about politics. This is still fighting Brexit, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, there's no question at all. This is trying to cover up for their complete failures through the whole vaccine procurement programme. They were slow to order them. They were slow to approve them. Their EU leaders have gotten a pickle and they've tried to basically trash the reputation of, one of the greatest and earliest approved vaccines. And I think, to be honest, Julia, if there was an EU referendum today, I have to say, I think the result would be 75-25 to leave. People in the UK have seen the EU leadership for what it is. It is protectionist, it is intimidatory, and when it suits them, bluntly, they're a bunch of bullies. We saw it earlier when they invoked Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol completely unilaterally. And we're seeing it ongoing. And I think people need to wake up and smell the coffee, really, as to how they behave.
The EU arguing that they're exporting vaccines from these factories in the EU, and that we in the UK are not exporting vaccines. Now, of course, it's not the EU exporting vaccines. It's pharma companies who have private contracts with national governments exporting to their customers. It's got, frankly, sort all to do with the EU, unless they do want to be protectionist like that. There is an argument, obviously, that would delay the UK rollout. If we couldn't get Pfizer vaccine, indeed that's one of the threats, or indeed the AstraZeneca vaccine from the EU factories where we have contracted to buy it, we couldn't get that. That would cut our rollout back by 2 months, bearing in mind, though, that all of the people who most need the vaccine will have already had their first jab, already have done, and will probably, they've got enough, I think, easily now for everyone of those people to have their second jab as well. But it would only improve the EU's rollout by 1 week. An EU commissioner last week said that member states were sitting on a stockpile of 14 million AstraZeneca jabs. So should they not use up their own jab supply first before they get involved with ours?
Of course they should. I mean, this highlights the lunatic irony of this, that, as I said, all these vaccines are filling up fridges across the whole of the EU because of the way that the EU leaders have trashed the reputation of the fantastic AstraZeneca. I had it last week. I have to say, I never felt better. I went for a run the following morning. But if they don't want the vaccines, give them to those of us who do want them. But I think the other point is, yes, if they carry out this threat, and let's hope they don't, because they are impinging on a private contract, as you say, but if they carry out this threat, then it shouldn't change, absolutely critical that it doesn't change the easing of our lockdown restrictions, given the success of our vaccination programme, given that effectively anybody over the age of 50 who wants a vaccine basically has now, I believe, had one. The threat to UK citizens from COVID is so dramatically reduced. We should be looking to advance the easing of the lockdown restrictions, not delay them. And that's why MPs in the House of Commons this week, they should only be granting the government, as far as I believe, an extra month and then judge it month by month, so that the UK citizens know that actually the government is committed to giving our freedoms back at the earliest possible opportunity, not unnecessarily extending these
indeed. I want to come on to that. Just want to ask you one final question in terms of the EU, though, because obviously there's a lot of thought that this could actually slow our lockdown. But should we retaliate if the EU, if at this meeting on Thursday, EU leaders decide that they will block exports of AstraZeneca and or Pfizer vaccines to the UK? Should the UK retaliate? It turns out that in Yorkshire, Croda International, a major chemical company there, they are suppliers of the crucial lipid, which is crucial to the Pfizer vaccine. Pfizer can't make vaccines in Europe to give to people in Europe unless they've got this. If the EU stop us from getting our vaccines that we've bought and paid for with a decent contract signed in good time, because the EU didn't do theirs, should we block the suppliers of lipid for their vaccines?
No, absolutely not. We should not interfere with private contracts. We should, of course, let those continue. What we should do is interfere at the top level, and we should make it very clear to the EU leadership that we will stop all future payments to the EU under the withdrawal agreement. We will invoke Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol. I've tweeted about that this morning. We should give them literally a couple of weeks' notice. Any more nonsense with paperwork restrictions going across the channel for fishing and other goods, either sort that out, otherwise they might find it's really rather hard to export German cars from Germany to the UK and the like. Those are the sort of top-level negotiating leverage that we need to impose rather than at the private contract.
Yeah, but also for me, I have to say the moral case of stopping people getting hold of life-saving vaccines. I would consider it vital that we maintain the moral upper hand there and don't go down to their level.
But we mustn't give away our negotiating leverage at the EU level in return in respect of money, in respect to the Northern Ireland Protocol and such like.
Okay, let's come back to the issue you mentioned of lockdown easing. We're constantly told that the dates we've had for this exit strategy, which we heard about on February the 22nd, which didn't exist, by the way, for a month and a half before then, that these were the earliest dates, different stages, the earliest possible date, and they would not be moved. Although we're looking at data, not dates, at no point would those dates be brought forward, but they could be lengthened. June the 21st is the date we're looking at when we are supposedly going to have no restrictions on social gatherings and the like. I'm looking forward to not having to wear a mask anywhere, because I've got to be honest, I'm at the end of my tether on that one.
So am I.
I'm going to literally go up to people in the street and hug them when we get to this. But we've got no definite guarantee that's going to happen. No guarantee that we won't see another lockdown come the autumn or winter, which I would not be surprised by at all. And we've got the government, even though these emergency powers end at the end of March, want to extend them to October. And there's going to be a vote in the House of Commons this week, where we know that Labour were going to sign up to this as well. It's not possible to amend it, to change the law at all. It's all or nothing. Do you extend these powers to the end of October or not? Why on earth would our government need emergency powers until the end of October?
Why on earth, indeed, unless actually there's something really rather more sinister going on. And the clue yesterday was given by a public health official to Andrew Marr on TV yesterday morning, when she said that actually we're just going to have to get used to wearing masks and social distancing for years to come. Well, if she wants to, fine, but we live in a free country. And I tell you what, I think people are pretty much near the end of their tether with this, Julia. People can see, they know the success of the vaccine story, and then they're saying, well, let's get the benefit of that. And actually, let's follow the data. And the data says we're safe. The data says the NHS is protected, it's not overwhelmed, there are plenty of hospital beds, but because all those at risk have been vaccinated, basically, we need to get on with our lives, get our lives back, get some self-confidence back, get the pubs open, get the restaurants open, and then actually lead the way in the world and say, this is how you do it. And then that'll put the EU leadership under even more pressure. That's what we should be doing. It's inexcusable for MPs to extend these restrictions more than month on month. What they should be doing is hold the government to account, hold them to the data, not dates, and get this country moving again and get some self-belief and self-confidence again.
Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK, thank you very much indeed for joining us on that. Let's bring in Will Geddes, he's a security expert. Daily Mail are actually leading on that point today. Shattering price of lockdown, huge impact on health and economy, of draconian curbs revealed. I mean, it's not absolutely fair to them. I mean, well done for doing that, but it's not actually been revealed. We've been talking about this solidly. But we're looking at an extra £1 billion added to the national debt every single day, £500 million of lost output every single day that lockdown carries on. It's untenable to extend lockdown any further, surely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with what Richard Tice was saying more. I think also these demonstrations in Bristol, in London, and we're seeing a frequency of these, although they may not represent the attitude of the entire UK, I think they are pretty representative of the fact that we're all fed up of lockdowns. We want to get back to some degree of normality.
You say we are all, the public... according to the polls, the majority of the public are loving lockdown. They are absolutely loving it. They're saving lives. They're still convinced it's saving lives. They're still convinced it's absolutely crucial to keep in lockdown. But I think a lot of them think it's for everyone else to be in lockdown. They're quite in favour of those rules for other people, while they quietly break the rules themselves because they're responsible.
Well, how much credence do we put in polls these days, Julia? I mean, again, I would say that there is very few people, even those that are anti-vaxxers that I know who are not going to have the vaccine, who want to get back to normality. And I think ultimately these extensions by the government for potential lockdown capabilities to October just sort of gives us all a heavy heart that, again, we're going to have another lost year as we did with 2020. Yeah. And I don't think economically, financially, whether that be for the country or whether for each of us individually, we can suffer any more lockdowns.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say, I can remember on New Year's Eve in 2020, and lots of people say, oh, thank God 2020 is over. 2021 is going to be brilliant. And I'm thinking, yeah, good luck with that, everybody. Let's talk about the EU vaccine wars and the vote later this week in the House of Commons that is expected to extend the lockdown powers that the government have under emergency laws all the way to October, which is rather strange, is it not, given that we're supposed to be out of lockdown completely on June the 21st. Well, let's talk to Sir Graham Brady. He's chairman of the 1922 Committee of Backbench Conservative MPs and he's also a member of the COVID Recovery Group of MPs. Good morning to you, Sir Graham.
Good morning, Jane.
Let's talk first of all, if we can, about the EU vaccine wars. This threat that's going to be discussed by the European leaders on Thursday to basically ban exports of the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines from European factories in Europe to the UK. Do you think that this is going to go ahead? And if it does, what retaliation should the UK impose?
Well, I think it obviously shouldn't go ahead. The odd thing in this is the EU seems to move one day from thinking the vaccine is dangerous and advising people not to take it to the next day saying they want so much of it they're not prepared to allow any of it to be exported. It makes no sense at all. But I do gather there are elements of some of the vaccines that are manufactured in the United Kingdom. And if you start to get into these games of banning export of vaccines to some countries, then, of course, there would inevitably be consequences. It's much better for contracts to be honoured and things to be able to move freely around the world.
I mean, it's not in anyone's interest for this to happen because, of course, we although we don't export vaccines, we do from this country export a rather crucial part of the Pfizer vaccine.
Precisely.
Croda International, a chemicals company in Yorkshire, supplies the lipid, which is absolutely crucial to the Pfizer vaccine. If we are facing the EU withholding vaccines that we have legitimately purchased with just getting an earlier and better contract with a private pharmaceutical company to supply those vaccines to the UK. If the EU interferes with that, should we interfere with the suppliers for their vaccines or not?
Well, I think we should just hope that it doesn't get to that point. It just demonstrates the fact that it would be silly for anybody to go down this route. Contracts should be honoured. Obviously, first of all, there are legal consequences if they're not. But I guess if there were to be a serious ongoing problem, then those are the kind of follow-up issues that arise.
We always seem to be in a bizarre situation where no matter how good the data, as we follow data, not dates, in terms of, say, the vaccine rollout, I mean, extraordinary numbers of people got vaccinated on Friday, Saturday and Sunday. I was one of those who got vaccinated on Saturday. We're looking at sort of 750,000 on Friday and Saturday, 844,000 plus yesterday alone. Huge numbers of the population, more than half of the adult population, well into those, like me, in the early 50s, who really are not, and who are perfectly healthy, not at high risk of getting serious seriously ill or dying of COVID. We have seen this extraordinary thing where even when the data is fabulous in terms of our plummeting death rates, plummeting infection rates, plummeting numbers of people in hospital needing treatment for COVID, that never seems to move the dates of us coming out of lockdown. However, when we've seen this threat of the vaccine being withheld and difficulties there from the EU, that immediately we are told, or even with just the ongoing issue with the EU's surging rates of COVID infections, that could actually jeopardise our roll out of our lockdown. On later this week, there is going to be a vote in the House of Commons to extend the government's emergency powers all the way to October, even though we're supposed to be out of lockdown in June. Why does the government want those powers? And are you going to vote against those?
Well, I probably will vote against. I'm strongly opposed to most of the rather extreme measures that have been taken. And as you know, my biggest concern, I think, for government to legislate in ways which prevents people from seeing their children or their grandchildren, stops single people from forming relationships. These are areas that government should not be involved in. And for it to be involved for a protracted period is even worse. And it was one thing for the government to ask for these powers for 3 weeks last March, when it said it wanted a very short lockdown. To take it through to a year and a half is another matter and is clearly excessive. Why does it want these powers? Well, you've got to remember at the outset the government was asking for the powers for 2 whole years. It was fortunate that my colleague David Davis tabled an amendment that required the government to seek renewal every 6 months. But I would argue that there's a very strong case the government doesn't have to simply follow that 6-monthly renewal. If the government believes it needs those powers for another 3 months, up to June the 21st, then the government could bring forward legislation. It was all done in a day when the initial legislation was introduced. They could bring it forward and it could be dealt with very rapidly by both houses of Parliament, and it could be renewed for 3 months. People need to understand, and the government needs to understand, that these powers are extreme. They should be regarded as highly unusual, exceptional powers granted in an emergency last March. There mustn't be a presumption that these kind of powers remain on the statute book just in case they are needed by government, or just in case, even worse, government feels that they're needed.
Now, there is no way you can amend this, is it? This bill is, you vote for the bill in its entirety or against the bill in its entirety. There's going to be a bunch of you from the COVID recovery group of Tory MPs, maybe a few Labour MPs as well, who will vote against it. Otherwise, if with the Tory majority of 80 and with the Labour votes as well, it's going to go through. But there is simply no justification for these powers to be held when we are supposed to be coming out of lockdown. And as you say, 18 months after the emergency apparently appeared.
Well, I'm afraid, Julia, this has been the practice throughout the last year, that nearly all of the votes that we have had, and haven't been enough things put to Parliament for approval, but nearly all of the votes we have had have been all or nothing votes with no possibility to amend the measures in place. And, there are so many things that could have been altered, could have made life a little bit better for people if we'd been able to amend things. I think, for instance, of the rule of 6 when it was introduced, and in some parts of Britain it applied to children, yep, and in other parts of Britain it didn't. And just making that small change would have made life better for a lot of families.
Sir Graham Brady, thank you very much indeed for joining us.